Bienvenidos a la vida de Satoshi en Venezuela.
Una conversación entre bitcoiners de cómo es vivir con bitcoins en Venezuela y demás.
Con sus presentadores Miguel Arroyo y Javier Bastardo. Bienvenidos a este nuevo capítulo de la vida de Satoshi en Venezuela. Quien les habla, Miguel Arroyo, @mglarroyo. Hoy les traigo un capitulazo y tengo el gusto también de presentar un capítulo muy especial para nosotros, tanto para Javier como para mí, que ya que tenemos que entrevistar, tuvimos el placer, Javier tuvo el placer de entrevistar al señor Andreas Antonopoulos, educador e investigador de Bitcoin. Es un grande en esta área de Bitcoin, donde Javier estuvo conversando un poco sobre cómo Andreas ve Bitcoin para Venezuela, qué opina sobre la criptomoneda nacional, donde además algo bastante curioso que van a escuchar en la entrevista es que Andreas se puso a hacerle una mini entrevista a Javier acerca de cómo es Bitcoin una solución para Venezuela, teniendo en cuenta los cortes eléctricos y fallas en el servicio de internet que sufren los venezolanos. La respuesta estuvo bastante curiosa. Junto a ello, también me llena mucho de orgullo que estamos estrenando sponsor, y los cuales han sido amigos de Satoshi desde sus inicios. Y no se trata nada más y nada menos que de Hodl, la mejor forma de comprar Bitcoin peer-to-peer, que ofrece intercambios o tú te registras y no necesitas verificación AML, KYC, y también ofrece comisiones 2 veces más bajas que sus competidores. Y también alguien que nos está apoyando a desarrollar este podcast, que agradecemos muchos, es Lend, que es una suite de servicios que nos ayuda a ahorrar y acumular más Bitcoin, basados en Canadá, pero que ofrece sus servicios completamente en español desde la página de contratos. Lend viene apoyando a Satoshi en Venezuela desde el primer día. Aquí, en Lend, vamos a contar con servicios de créditos en BTC, totalmente respaldados en BTC, y que nos permiten utilizar dólares estadounidenses sin vender nuestros BTC, es decir, quedan en reserva. Y también nos permite crear una cuenta de ahorros que genera intereses pagados directamente en BTC. Sin más nada que decirles, los dejo con la gran entrevista que tuvimos en este cuarto capítulo de la vida de Satoshi en Venezuela.
Well, I'm very pleased to have you, Mr. Andreas, and it's a great pleasure to interview you. And let's begin with the question without no presentation. I know that many of our listeners will know who are you, and let's do it.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. First of all, I want to know what triggered your interest in doing this podcast with this kind of interviews, as am I of other Venezuelans that interviewed you?
Well, I think that the situation in Venezuela shows the danger of having government be in control of money, and what can happen when a government that is in control of money doesn't act in good faith. And a lot of people think that the purpose of Bitcoin is to replace government money, but I see it more as a lifeboat, as a security mechanism. So I think people should have a choice, and they should be able to exercise that choice. And to me, that's what Bitcoin represents. So I know that Bitcoin can't help Venezuela today. It can only help a few people, but it shows us what the future is likely to bring, because Venezuela will not be the last country to have a financial crisis in its currency. And as cryptocurrencies get bigger and better and easier to use, There will come a day when a government simply can't take the entire population hostage, close down the borders, close currencies, and create this kind of humanitarian disaster.
Okay, and you wanted to know about how we see this kind of conflicts, or why do you need to hear our voices? That's what I'm looking to.
I would love to hear, how can Bitcoin help in a situation such as the situation that is being faced in Venezuela? Can it help today? And if so, how?
Okay, and I have a question on this, and I was listening the whole podcast where you been the last month, and you said in one of those that you think that people here or in countries as Argentina or in developing countries in general has a better way to understand Bitcoin, and their question is not why Bitcoin, but how Bitcoin. But here, I don't find this kind of person. Many people just want to know how they can get money with this. Do you think that this is a thing that we have, I don't know, like open-mindedness because our money don't worth anything, or what do you think about this?
Well, I can tell you that when I talk with North Americans, for example, people from the United States or from Western Europe and developed countries in Europe, I often get asked, well, why do we need Bitcoin? We don't need Bitcoin. And that's something that's very different from my experience, at least. I've not been to Venezuela, but my experience in Argentina, where I've been many times, is that if you say to someone, you can't trust government money, they say, no, you can't. You can't trust government money. If you say that in America, people think you're weird, because they do trust government money. And for the most part, they can. So I think that's the big difference.
Yes, it's totally true, because we have a poor institution. We don't believe in our politics. We don't believe in the regime. And, we don't... I think that we don't really trust in anything that work here. And I have another question on this. We have a pseudo cryptocurrency that I love to name it like a pseudo thing, no a cryptocurrency at all. Mm-hmm. That is the petro, and it stands against one of the most important things that you've been talking, that is privacy, that is the privacy of the citizens here. Do you think that the petro is a cryptocurrency? And if yes, or if not, why do you think that?
Well, I'm not sure that the word cryptocurrency means anything nowadays. It's been used in so many different ways. I have usually a series of questions that I ask. And to me, what matters is if it is an open, public cryptocurrency, an interesting one that's actually decentralized. So I would ask, is it open? Can anyone participate without authorization? Is it borderless? Can it be used in any country in the world, anywhere in the world? Is it neutral? Does it control transactions based on source, destination, value, or purpose? Is it censorship resistant? Can you make a transaction even if someone doesn't want you to make a transaction? Is it publicly verifiable? Can everybody look at the blockchain and verify that a transaction has happened or verify that it's correct? And is it immutable? Once you make a transaction, can you change it or not? So those are the types of questions I would ask. As far as I understand it, the petro fails on at least 3 of those, probably more. And for that, it means it's not interesting to me. It serves a purpose, but the purpose it serves is not the purpose that I'm looking for. It maybe serves the purpose of the Venezuelan government.
Yeah, as far as I know and as I understand it, the petro is just a control tool that will give the government a new kind of control over our privacy, our finance, and this is why we need Bitcoin. That is indeed in this kind of a scenario where I think that we as Venezuelans and many other people that face authoritarian regimes, will need and will understand that they can choose Bitcoin, no? And
I have a
well,
question for you, if you don't mind.
okay. Yeah,
One
yeah.
of the things that I've heard and had discussions with other people, including people from Venezuela, is that there is very, very unstable electricity supply in Venezuela. So there's very often power cuts, and you don't have electricity for hours and hours in some days and in some areas. How do Bitcoiners in Venezuela, people who are already interested in Bitcoin and trying to use Bitcoin, how do they deal with the lack of electricity? How do you run a digital internet connected currency when you have no electricity?
No, this is one of the things that we find that is impossible to us to use Bitcoin as a deep solution of every problems, because we have basic problems like we don't have electricity for many hours. And I'm in Caracas, but in states like Zulia or in Bolivar, they have more time without electricity. And in these cases, of course, that Bitcoin doesn't work because we need internet to use it as a medium of exchange if we want to buy something immediately. And obviously nobody will want to make I don't know, like a PSBT transaction, for example. I don't think that we can use Bitcoin when we have 3 days of a blackout or 2 weeks of a blackout. And in these cases, obviously, it doesn't work. But
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing. We have this petro, and the government is trying to pull this narrative of the crypto nation, that it will solve everything, that the Bolivar will, the economy will bloom, that everything will be okay. And they don't ask this kind of question that you ask me. Like the petro is a kind of magician. I don't know how we can spread this awareness. Like, I understand the limitation of Bitcoin. I understand that it's not a finance solution here, but it isn't petro neither. And
Yes.
how we can spread this awareness, this critic view on Bitcoin limitation, on how it stands against petro in some way.
Well, I'm assuming that if you want to use Bitcoin for store value or for importing and exporting money into and out of Venezuela from other countries, then you can do that because you don't have you can choose the time when you do a transaction to be the time when you have internet and electricity. And if you have to wait 2 days or charge a solar panel or a generator or something to do one transaction a month, maybe it's usable for that. So that would mean that more store value, not so much medium of exchange. Is that the case? Do you find you can use it for that?
Yes, because in many cases, to use even dollars to make payments is expensive that could be just to pay in bolivars. And so I don't want to spend satoshis if I can, spend bolivars. And
Mm-hmm.
the merchant that handle it how he wants it. But we usually don't use Bitcoin or nor even other cryptocurrency as a medium of exchange. We are really a little number of people that are using it as a payment. The main use case is as a store of value, as we use them also the dollar. So
Yeah.
in this case, I agree with you. We have many limitations, but in that case, we are using it as a store of value against the depreciation, the highly depreciation of our own currency. You know.
I was having a conversation recently with a person who sends money to Venezuela on a regular basis. So they have a relative in Venezuela. And I want you to tell me if this story is true or not, or if you think it might be true or not. So what they were telling me was that they used to send dollars to Venezuela by hiding them inside letters. So $100 bills hidden inside letters. So just looking like regular postal mail. And they switched to sending Bitcoin instead. And they said the reason they switched was this. The person receiving the $100 bills was having a big problem with spending them because their weekly expenses were not $100, much less. And so $100 represented a month of basic expenses. And if they tried to change it at a black market exchange, and they give $100, they would get all of it in bolivars. They couldn't just exchange $10 or $20. So they would have to change the whole $100 bill, and they would get all of their change in bolivars. But then the problem is that over the next month and a half, they're now holding bolivars, and those are losing value. So they said, better to try Bitcoin, because then I can exchange 0.0000001, $10 worth, and only that, divide it as much as I want and change only the amount I need for 1 week, so that I hold Bitcoin and spend bolivars. This was how the conversation was described to me. What do you think of that? Is that a real thing, or is someone just telling you a story?
No, yes, totally. Because many times when you want to exchange dollars for bolivars, you will face the problem that the buyer don't have enough dollars to give you, I don't know, like $90, and they can't just buy a little portion of your bill. So you should sell the whole bill, and that the bolivar appreciate in the daily basis. So if you change, I don't know, $100 today, obviously in 1 week, probably you will have like 20% less. And that's a thing that we can face losing money.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this is why Bitcoin make a little sense more, because we have many people that buy and sell gold in the streets. We have little merchant of gold that say se compra oro. That's a typical question here. And we can avoid the problem of trust, sellers, of buyers, or we can avoid the problem of security on selling dollars to people that we don't know using Bitcoin. The problem is obviously not many people I don't know, like they don't know how to use local Bitcoins or stuff like that. And so as you said recently, this is a thing for elites. It's for people that can afford or can have the time to at least understand the basics on how to exchange, how to use it. But yeah, it have many limitations, and we understand that. And the main goal of Satoshi in Venezuela, that is the project that we are making this podcast, is to educate people as you do too. I understand that the education is a really good way to make people to onboard Bitcoin with I don't know a kind of conscience to use it in this context. And do you think that the educational approach it's difficult to say people in this context that come here, educate yourself, come here and learn about Bitcoin, but how we can make this educational stuff we need education, how we can make the education more sexy, I don't know.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, that's always difficult, right? So for me, I think one of the big things, and tell me if you agree or not, is a lot of the education in our space is in English. And for the last 2 years, I've been working to get more and more of it translated into Spanish. My Spanish isn't good enough to do it, to do original work in Spanish, but for example, all of the books are being translated into Spanish or have been translated into Spanish. And as of today, 100 of my YouTube videos have Spanish subtitles. So to me, I think one of the big problems is language. In order to help people, because I'm assuming a lot of the people who need help don't speak or read good enough English for a very technical and difficult topic like Bitcoin. Even if they do know some English, maybe not to a level like you do where it's possible to understand a technical topic. So the education has to be in Spanish. And the same thing you said, people don't know how to use local Bitcoins, or don't know how to use BISC, or don't know how to use other platforms, wallets, etc., to use Bitcoin. How many of those platforms and applications have native Spanish localization? I think that's a very, very big problem for the education.
Another thing that you said to say is that the educators, the people that understand Bitcoin and can share it, should have some kind of values. And we don't have people with so many values here. Many people want to just scam some people with, I don't know, multi-level marketing, trading bots, blockchain, blah, 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 how we can know that the people we are looking to understand these things are really concerned about these values, and then how we know that they aren't just scammers.
Yeah, that's very difficult. And I think from my perspective, the best antidote to scams like that is having face-to-face meetings and building community around face-to-face meetings. It's ironic that we're talking about a system of trust minimization or trustless commerce like Bitcoin, where the idea is that you trust the software and you don't have to trust the other people. But especially in the beginning, and especially when it comes to education and introducing these new concepts, the problem is that you do need to trust people. And I think that trust is better achieved if you have face-to-face meetings and you have regular face-to-face meetings and build community. So for example, I've participated in a number of local meetups and community building in the US and Europe and parts of South America. And when someone tries to promote a scam, then there's 10 other people in the community who will warn you at the weekly meeting, oh, don't talk to this person. They're running a pyramid scheme. No, that's a scam. Don't put your money there. And if somebody knows that they have a local community, and that local community is made by other people who are following these principles, then they can ask. They can ask for help, and the community can help each other to avoid scams and build that education. So I don't know if that helps, but that might.
I think that totally helps, because we are building a kind of community, regular meetups where we chat about Bitcoin. We had Elizabeth Stark in a live stream in our last meetup, and it's great to see that people recognize that we don't try to scam them. We don't. This is for free. We are doing this because we understand the critical point that education is in these kind of things. And thank you for taking the time to chat a little about Venezuela. Let's talk about other topic. Like, I really like to chat with you. I listened to a pod where you was with Stefan Libera about the maximalism. And I understand this idea of the Pareto distribution. I really appreciate this kind of explanation. But do you think that this maximalism thing and this way of thinking is really a thing of values of Bitcoiners, or is just a misunderstanding of these values that we recently talked? But because you said community will know to show that people is a scammer, and this maximalist thing is like the worst of the scammy signaling. I don't know, like to name it. But do you think that this is a good way to see the Bitcoiners, or what do you think about that?
Well, I think, like in any community, there's a very, very big range of opinion and expression and behavior. And so there are principled maximalists who are very well intentioned. Some of them are friends of mine, and we disagree on some things, but we still keep it very respectful. And some people are not so principled. And so putting all maximalists together as one unified philosophy, I think, is wrong. Just like putting all cryptos that are not Bitcoin together as scams is also wrong, right? It's just a gross simplification of something that is much more complex and much more nuanced. So I think there are a lot of principled maximalists whose primary motivation is to warn other people of scams. And I think that's, as you said, that's a useful function of the community. But I think there's also a good way to do that and a bad way to do that. And a good way to do that is by focusing on the principles you think are important. And a bad way to do that is to personally attack people who are doing something different. And I think that sometimes that gets blurred, right? You can protect people from scams by telling them why certain aspects of Bitcoin are principled and important without attacking people who have a different opinion. And to me, I think it's very important to not make it personal. Because if you make it personal, you lose credibility. And it damages our community if we're attacking each other. Because as much as some people might see some other cryptocurrencies that are doing different things than Bitcoin as scams, that doesn't even begin to compare to things like the petro or Facebook's Libra or the threats we have from banks and governments and traditional finance. I think we should at the same time be focused on the fact that the real threat is massively centralized finance under state control and used for surveillance, or under corporate control and used for surveillance. And that open blockchains and open cryptocurrencies that are trying to do something and doing it slightly different than Bitcoin are not the real threat. So some of them, sure, are outright scams, but they're small scams compared to the petro, or the International Monetary Fund, or those are big scams, and they're much more dangerous, and they destroy and result in the deaths of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people around the world. So they create war and destruction and poverty. I think we should remain focused. Yes, there will be pyramid schemes and there will be MLMs, etc. But if you call everything a scam, eventually you just lose credibility, right? Because then people stop listening to you. I think it's important to be careful where and when you apply all of your effort, and to do it by emphasizing the principles, not attacking other people.
Yes, totally. We criticize projects. We don't attack people in personal way. And just to finish the interview, I have lining questions like A or B. Can we do it?
Yes.
Poetry or novels?
Novels.
Sports. Do you like basketball or football? None of them. Pineapples on pizza or nah?
Yes.
One BTC or $10,000?
One BTC.
And finally, I know that you don't mind on price and you don't like that, but is the halving priced in or not?
I would say not.
Well, it's enough that. Thanks a lot, Mr. Andreas. I know that you are busy and it's a terrific pleasure to have you. Muchas gracias de verdad por esta entrevista.
Muchas gracias, Javier. Mucho gusto de conocerle.
Bueno, espero que esté bien. See you.
Hasta luego. For sure. Let's do this again.
Thanks a lot.
Bueno, hasta aquí el episodio de hoy. Espero haya sido de su agrado esta gran entrevista con el señor Andreas Antonopoulos. Recuerden, como todos los podcasts, como siempre nos despedimos en todos los podcasts, pueden escucharnos en todas las plataformas. Ya nos encontramos en todas las plataformas: Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, iVoox, Castbox, Anchor, Radio Public. Pueden escucharnos en todas las plataformas, así que no hay excusas. Y también recuerden seguirnos a las redes sociales de Javier y yo, que es @criptobastardo, la de Javier, y la mía MGL Arroyo en Twitter y en cualquier red social. Y obviamente Satoshi en Venezuela lo pueden encontrar en Twitter y en Instagram como @Satoshi en BZLA, y su página web Satoshi en Venezuela. No me quiero despedir sin antes agradecer a nuestros 2 nuevos sponsors que nos ayudan a llevar este podcast adelante, nos ayudan a seguir emprendiendo acá, que es Hodl, un exchange sin cállese y sin custodia, y Lend, una suite de servicios que te ayuda a ahorrar y acumular más Bitcoin. Será hasta un siguiente episodio, nos estaremos escuchando.